This is video 11 in the Divided Kingdom series. We've gone through all 20 kings in the northern kingdom and found that none of them were adjudged righteous. In the last video, we started through the southern kingdom and looked at the first two kings. We learned that Judah started off pretty much the same as the northern kingdom. Both Rehoboam and his son Abijah did evil in the sight of the Lord, and predictably, within 3 years, Judah was worshiping other gods too. But in 910 BC, King Asa assumed the throne. So in this video, we finally get to see what happens when the nation is ruled by a king that does right in the sight of the Lord. That isn't to say that Asa and Jehoshaphat were perfect. Far from it. I'd describe both of these guys as, yeah, pretty good, or maybe mostly righteous. As we continue, we'll find that even the best kings had serious flaws and shortcomings, and some kings who started out with the highest of good and greatest intentions sometimes ended their life very poorly. King Asa is one that messed up badly toward the end of his life and finished poorly. His son Jehoshaphat made horrible choices that nearly destroyed his family and nation, but God, who knows the hearts of each individual, including you and me, evaluated both of these guys as doing what was right in his eyes, despite these obvious shortcomings. So I guess that means there's still hope for us. The third king of Judah was greatly honored by his people. After nearly constant warfare throughout the reigns of both Rehoboam and Abijah, King Asa finally brought peace and prosperity to his land. He reigned 41 years. He was zealous in maintaining the true worship of Yahweh. He rooted out idolatry and immoralities within his kingdom. He expelled the male shrine prostitutes, and he got rid of idols his predecessors had allowed to creep in over the last 20 years or so. He even deposed his own grandmother, the favorite wife of Rehoboam and granddaughter of King David. Maacah used her power as queen mother to propagate idolatry instead of righteousness. Asa cut down her Asherah pole and burned it in the Kedron Valley. 1 Kings 15 says Asa's heart was committed to the Lord. During the first 35 years of his 41-year reign, Asa did what was right in the eyes of the Lord, but he did not remove all of the high places. And the 2 Chronicles 15 says there was no war until the 35th year. That sounds ominous, doesn't it? Well, we'll get to that, but first let's read some scripture.
The Lord is with you while you are with him. If you seek him, he will be found by you. But if you forsake him, he will forsake you. For a long time Israel was without the true God, and without a teaching priest, and without law. But when in their distress they turned to the Lord, the God of Israel, and sought him, he was found by them. In those times there was no peace to him who went out, or to him who came in, for great disturbances afflicted all the inhabitants of the lands. They were broken in pieces. Nation was crushed by nation, and city by city, for God troubled them with every sort of distress. But you take courage. Do not let your hands be weak, for your work shall be rewarded.
As soon as Asa heard these words, the prophecy of Azariah the son of Oded, he took courage and put away the detestable idols from all the land of Judah and Benjamin, and from the cities that he had taken in the hill country of Ephraim. And he repaired the altar of the Lord that was in front of the vestibule of the house of the Lord. And he gathered all Judah and Benjamin, and those from Ephraim, Manasseh, and Simeon, who were residing with them, for great numbers had deserted to him from Israel when they saw that the Lord his God was with him. They were gathered at Jerusalem in the 3rd month of the 15th year of the reign of Asa. They sacrificed to the Lord on that day from the spoil that they had brought 700 oxen and 7,000 sheep. And they entered into a covenant to seek the Lord, the God of their fathers, with all their heart and with all their soul. But that whoever would not seek the Lord, the God of Israel, should be put to death, whether young or old, man or woman. They swore an oath to the Lord with a loud voice, and with shouting, and with trumpets, and with horns. And all Judah rejoiced over the oath, for they had sworn with all their heart, and had sought him with their whole desire. And he was found by them, and the Lord gave them rest all around.
Besides restoring Yahweh worship to his land, King Asa faced 2 big military challenges during his 41-year reign. The first instance, he trusted the Lord completely, and God gave him the victory. In the second, he messed up. He totally dropped the ball. The first battle occurred when Judah was invaded by Ethiopia. Now, your Bible may call them Cushites. Cush lies along the Nile River south of Egypt, and for most of its existence was subservient to Egypt. Historians refer to this region by various names such as Cush, Ethiopia, Nubia. These are the 3 most common names. Ethiopians held a reputation as fierce fighters, and the bow was their principal weapon. These black soldiers were recruited by Egypt, Assyria, Greece, Rome, even Israel in 2 Samuel 18, 2 Chronicles 14. For example, after Absalom's revolt against David was defeated, Joab chose a Cushite to take the bad news of Absalom's death back to his father David. This wooden model on the screen contains 40 Cushite archers, and it was discovered inside an Egyptian tomb and dates back to about 2000 BC. It's believed the Ethiopians attacked Judah on behalf of Pharaoh Osorkon II. Hopefully you remember that Pharaoh Shishak subjugated Judah during Rehoboam's reign, and Judah had been paying tribute to Egypt ever since. Many scholars believe the righteous King Asa probably just stopped paying tribute as part of his many reforms after he fortified some of his cities. The Pharaoh sent his vassal, Ethiopia, to come collect his money. And the Ethiopians massed an enormous army about 35 miles southwest of Jerusalem. According to several commentaries I read, this was probably the largest army the Hebrews ever faced.
And Asa had an army of 300,000 from Judah, armed with large shields and spears, and 280,000 men from Benjamin that carried shields and drew bows. All these were mighty men of valor. Zerah the Ethiopian came out against them with an army of 1,000,000 men and 300 chariots, and came as far as Maresha. And Asa went out to meet him, and they drew up their lines of battle in the valley of Zephathah at Maresha. And Asa cried to the Lord his God,
O Lord, there is none like you to help between the mighty and the weak. Help us, O Lord our God, for we rely on you, and in your name we have come against this multitude. O Lord, you are our God. Let not man prevail against you.
So the Lord defeated the Ethiopians before Asa and before Judah, and the Ethiopians fled. Asa and the people who were with him pursued them as far as Gerar, and the Ethiopians fell until none remained alive, for they were broken before the Lord and his army. The men of Judah carried away very much spoil, and they attacked all the cities around Gerar, for the fear of the Lord was upon them. They plundered all the cities, for there was much plunder in them. And they struck down the tents of those who had livestock, and carried away sheep in abundance and camels. Then they returned to Jerusalem.
King Asa had exclaimed, "Lord, there is no one like you to help the powerless against the mighty. We rely on you." But what a difference just 1 year makes. Too bad King Asa didn't remember his own words when Judah was attacked again, this time by a much smaller army of Israel. We discussed this battle in some detail when we studied King Baasha from Israel. Israel passed southward and captured Ramah. Do you remember this? Ramah was only 5 miles north of Jerusalem. King Asa had to do something, but what? After having consistently relied upon Yahweh for the past 35 years, and after having recently experienced God's miraculous deliverance from a vastly superior Ethiopian army, Asa once again found his faith being tested. Would God deliver him again? Is it really true that there's no one like Yahweh to help the powerless against the mighty? Has anyone besides Asa and me found themselves facing similar questions? The Apostle Paul compared the Christian life to running a race, and only those who actually cross the finish line receive a prize. Sadly, Asa stumbled almost within sight of the finish line and never got up again. Instead of relying upon Yahweh as he had done in his previous encounter, Asa relied upon his old enemy, Syria. Do you remember how Asa accomplished this? Does this picture ring any bells? Asa paid Syria to attack Israel from behind.
Asa took all the silver and the gold that were left in the treasures of the house of the Lord, and the treasures of the king's house, and gave them into the hands of his servants. And King Asa sent them to Ben-Hadad, the son of Tabrimmon, the son of Hezion, king of Syria, who lived in Damascus, saying,
Let there be a covenant between me and you, as there was between my father and your father. Behold, I am sending to you a present of silver and gold. Go, break your covenant with Baasha, king of Israel, that he may withdraw from me.
Asa took God's money and gave it to King Ben-Hadad I. Syria then attacked Israel's northern frontier, drawing Baasha's forces away from Ramah. Asa destroyed Ramah, and he used the rubble to build up defensive positions, and Judah was saved. Ramah was just rubble, but at least it's Asa's rubble. Baasha would never again attack Judah, but that wasn't the way God wanted Asa to handle the matter.
Because you relied on the king of Syria and did not rely on the Lord your God, the army of the king of Syria has escaped you. Were not the Ethiopians and the Libyans a huge army with very many chariots and horsemen? Yet because you relied on the Lord, he gave them into your hand. For the eyes of the Lord run to and fro throughout the whole earth, to give strong support to those whose heart is blameless toward him. You have done foolishly in this, for from now on you will have wars.
So as punishment for Asa's unfaithfulness, Judah was involved in wars during the rest of Asa's reign.
In the 39th year of his reign, Asa was diseased in his feet, and his disease became severe. Yet even in his disease he did not seek the Lord, but sought help from physicians. And Asa slept with his fathers, dying in the 41st year of his reign.
And that was the turning point for Asa. Now, what do you think was the most admirable quality of King David? Well, I think it was his willingness to repent. When he messed up, he really messed up big time. But when confronted with his sin, he always repented almost immediately, and he repented big time. Asa didn't. He hardened his heart, and from this point on, Asa turned his back on God. In his old age, when he suffered from a severe foot disease, he stubbornly refused to even ask for Yahweh's help. Instead, he relied on only human efforts. When Asa died, his son Jehoshaphat became king of Judah. Now, he's been known as Jumpin' Jehoshaphat for years, but there's absolutely no biblical support for this. Throughout his entire 25-year reign, his devotion to Yahweh never jumped. But like his father, he also made several major blunders. Nevertheless, these mistakes never deterred him from relying on Yahweh. His name means Yahweh judged, or judged by Yahweh, and Yahweh judged him to be the second righteous king of Judah.
Great Jumpin' Jehoshaphat.
Jehoshaphat was a man of great diplomatic skill, but an extremely poor judge of character. His biggest weakness was forming alliances with evil men who took advantage of him. All of these alliances proved detrimental to him personally and to his nation. And although the Lord reprimanded him, Jehoshaphat just kept repeating the same mistake over and over and over again. He came to power in the wake of almost continuous warfare that characterized those waning years of his father Asa. It's probably only natural that one of the first things he did was to beef up border fortifications, especially along the northern frontier with Israel. After fortifying his kingdom, he continued the efforts his father had begun early in his reign by attempting to cleanse the land of idolatry. His leadership was so effective and God's blessing so abundant that Judah enjoyed much internal peace and prosperity. Military security became the rule rather than the exception. Arabs and longtime adversaries, the Philistines, began paying tribute to Judah. In his third year, Jehoshaphat established a traveling school staffed by 16 well-trained priests who toured the country teaching the law of Yahweh to the general population. Over time, Jehoshaphat established surprisingly good relations with the surrounding nations, including his previously threatening neighbor to the north, Israel. The evil king Ahab was ruling in Israel. Do you remember who his father was? Omri. Do you remember how Omri secured a treaty with the king of Sidon? He married Ahab off to Jezebel. Well, there's no such thing as a free lunch. Peace has a price, after all. Jehoshaphat paid it. He arranged the marriage of his son, Jehoram, to King Ahab's daughter as part of the peace agreement. He didn't consult the Lord, but he surely should have considered that linking his family to blatant idol worshippers who were murdering Yahweh's prophets might not have been a good idea. You don't know. He went ahead anyway. Later, during a meeting between these two now in-laws, King Ahab casually suggests Jehoshaphat might help him regain some territory previously lost to Syria. At least Jehoshaphat had the sense to not rush right into the deal. He agreed on condition that they seek the Lord's approval first. Well, the Lord did not approve, but for some inexplicable reason, Jehoshaphat went ahead anyway. You fool. Do you remember that a prophet actually predicted Ahab would be killed in this battle? Yeah, and you'd think that that alone would be enough to give both kings pause. But undeterred, Jehoshaphat went ahead anyway and nearly got killed in the process. His good buddy set him up. Ahab talked Jehoshaphat into riding in the chariot at the head of the army wearing his king outfit, and Ahab would ride in the back dressed incognito. Duh! How stupid can you get? Who do you figure Ahab thought might control Judah after the fool got himself killed? Ben-Hadad had instructed his men to aim for only one guy, Ahab. Assuming that the guy riding in the head of Israel's army, wearing the big sign that says, "Shoot me," must be Ahab, they closed in for the kill. Jehoshaphat suddenly realized his predicament and, at least then, shouted to the Lord to his credit. Hearing him call on Yahweh, the enemy broke off their attack because they knew this guy couldn't possibly be Ahab. He's calling on Yahweh. A prophet named Jehu later told Jehoshaphat that the Lord was angry with him for disobeying. A partnership between righteous and wicked was repulsive to the Lord. Well, not learning from this fiasco, Jehoshaphat agreed to another alliance. This time it was with Ahab's son, King Ahaziah, since by then Ahab was dead. Ahaziah proved no better than his father. Like Ahab, he was wholeheartedly committed to evil, and like Ahab, he took advantage of Jehoshaphat. God didn't find this alliance any better than the last one, and again, Jehoshaphat should have known better. Ahaziah talked him into building a fleet of trading ships. Now, I'm not sure how much talking it really took, but together they decided to break into the lucrative international shipping business. A prophet even told Jehoshaphat ahead of time that Yahweh was going to destroy the boats, but he went ahead anyway. And sure enough, Yahweh destroyed the entire fleet in 1 Kings 22. Ahaziah was not deterred. He urged Jehoshaphat to try again. Hey, man, this time it's got to work. But this time, Jehoshaphat did listen to the Lord and respectfully declined. Jehoshaphat's third big mistake was an ill-planned war with Moab. And once again, this involved Ahab's family. But now it's Ahaziah that's dead, and King Joram is king, and he gets to take advantage of Jehoshaphat. You'll remember that Joram is another son of King Ahab, because Ahaziah didn't have any kids. You'll also remember that Moab was conquered by King Omri, Joram's grandfather. Years back, they'd paid tribute to Omri and Ahab, but when Ahaziah became king, they decided they'd paid enough. Ahaziah really couldn't do much about it, but now Joram was king and he wanted that money, and he wanted his relative in the south to help him get it. So, do you think after being burned once by Ahab, and then being burned again by Ahaziah, that the righteous King Jehoshaphat would be stupid enough to get involved with this family in the north again? Yeah. Do you think he'd do it without asking the Lord first? Again? Well, the answer is yes in both counts. Jehoshaphat not only joined the adventure eagerly, but he brought along his own vassal, the king of Edom, to help out. A week out into the desert, they ran out of water, and the Joram characteristically blamed Yahweh. Jehoshaphat characteristically asked Yahweh what to do now that he'd gotten himself into this mess. I'd like to have a cut of Laurel and Hardy with the phrase, "This is another fine mess you've gotten me into," but I couldn't find one. Elisha told him to dig ditches and the Lord would fill them with water. They dug the ditches and, sure enough, the next morning a flash flood filled the ditches and the armies were saved. The Moabites saw the water-filled ditches. They thought it was blood and concluded that the three armies had slaughtered each other. Throwing caution to the wind, they all rushed headlong out there without their weapons into the enemy's camp. So Moab was so badly devastated that King Mesha desperately sacrificed his own son on the city wall, to no avail. This horrible act filled Jehoshaphat with such revulsion that he immediately withdrew his forces, never to be involved with Israel again. Finally. But that wasn't the end of his involvement with Moab. Out in the desert, the Lord had instructed them to impair Moab's future fighting capability by destroying Moab's timber, stopping up the wells, and destroying the fields. They didn't do it. So Jehoshaphat's greatest challenge, and admittedly his most shining moment, came when Judah's very existence was threatened later by Moab and two other armies. Recognizing his total helplessness, Jehoshaphat hosted a national day of fasting and prayer, and he ended his prayer with these great words: "We do not know what to do, but our eyes are upon you." Yahweh instructed Judah to march out against the invaders without fear, assume battle positions, but stand and watch as the Lord fought this battle for them. The army was not to participate in the fighting at all. And the next morning, Jehoshaphat's army was led not by the strongest soldiers, but by the temple choir. And they marched out to meet the enemy, singing praises to Yahweh. As they approached, the three attacking armies became confused and began killing each other. And by the time Judah showed up, the battle was already over, and there were no survivors. It took 3 days to collect all of the plunder. Unfortunately, all good things must come to an end, and Jehoshaphat died at the age of 60 after 25 years of consistently turning to the Lord. Eventually, in his time of greatest testing, he passed the test. And Jehoshaphat is one of those kings we should emulate when facing challenges of our own that are beyond our abilities. On the downside, though, he sought the Lord with all his heart, but he made pretty serious blunders that had disastrous effects on his family and his nation. 3 times Jehoshaphat formed partnerships with men who knowingly rejected the Lord and followed the popular religions of their day. The Lord repeatedly told Jehoshaphat these partnerships were wrong, and Jehoshaphat's actions incurred lots of consequences which couldn't be avoided, but we shouldn't be surprised by that now. Like Solomon and Jeroboam and Baasha and Ahab and Jeroboam II, God postponed these consequences until his appointed time. The righteous king Jehoshaphat died in peace before the effects of the consequences were fully realized. Lucky guy. In the next video, we'll find out just how bad those consequences were. We're going to be covering 2 Chronicles chapters 21 through 25, and you might also want to read the parallel passages in 2 Kings. Okay, have a good day.